Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. The Timberwolves avoid the play-in. They face the Lakers in the first round. They beat the Jazz on Sunday. Anthony Edwards is the three-point champion of the NBA. It's a packed show. Lots to get to. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I am the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend, an eventful Timberwolves weekend. Since the last time we had a regular show, the Wolves won Friday night. Ant got a technical, was going to be suspended Sunday. It was rescinded Saturday. The Wolves win Sunday. They avoid the play-in. Lots to talk about on the show today. Of course, a lot to get to this week as we prep you for Wolves-Lakers, which will get underway this coming weekend. So a packed week ahead. We'll have some great guests. Lots to unpack throughout this packed week. But today, we'll talk a little bit about the Jazz game here off the top. We'll talk about what the Wolves did well in this one to close out the regular season. We'll talk about Ant's phenomenal performance really all the way around. And I kind of want to just give some props to the Wolves for the way they closed the season, despite some of the, it doesn't feel as joyous as last year. Oh, wait a minute. Remember, last year, the Wolves lost game 82, and it was the sky was falling headed to the playoffs, and they were the 3 seed. So let's compare this year to last year in terms of the vibe check coming out of game 82. We'll do that today on the show as well. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon at Fire TV. And also a reminder to subscribe to the daily email newsletter at lockedondaily.com. It's one-stop shop for all things Wolves, all things NBA. You'll get some notes from myself. You'll get some national NBA notes and news and some great articles, and then also links around the Wolves world from around the internet. So really valuable email newsletter. Sign up at lockedondaily.com. All right. So, of course, everyone knows coming into game 82 on Sunday, the Timberwolves needed to win to avoid the play-in. They could have fallen as low as 8. They could have been at 7. If they won and had things break their way, they could have gotten as high as 4th in the Western Conference. Instead, they settled at 6, which I thought was always the most likely scenario, was they'd be, basically 5 or 6. And they ended up 6th in the Western Conference. They'll take on the Lakers in the first round. That'll get underway probably Saturday. So plenty of time to talk about that. I do want to spend some time on the Jazz game. We'll talk about everything else that happened, over the course of the season. But I mean, like, the Wolves finished the year winning 17-21. Like, it's hard to do much better than that when your back's a little bit against the wall, at least in the sense the Wolves weren't performing up to expectations for much of the season. And they came through toward the end of the year. And yeah, the 6th seed isn't what everybody set out for, but it's a lot better than 7 or 8. It is. All right, let's talk about this Jazz game first. And, Utah's missing everybody, right? Like, obviously no Markkanen, Walker Kessler sitting out, Colin Sexton's out, Isaiah Collier, like all sorts of guys that are like the only legit like NBA caliber type players. I mean, Bryce Sensabaugh is kind of fun. Kyle Filipowski, of course, the rookie. Keontae George did not play well, but he played. I don't know, like Svi Mykhailiuk played as well. It was, it wasn't really an NBA team taking on the Wolves, but they played fairly hard. And early in the game, Minnesota was up 6 at the end of the first quarter. They were only up 1 at halftime. And it was really, I thought, at least early, more a function of the Wolves missing open shots than it was anything else. I actually thought Minnesota played pretty hard, was making the right passes on offense. They just weren't making shots. And that actually kind of continued throughout the game. Ant was really the only one that was I would say, locked in offensively, at least in this game. There were certainly some other good individual performances, but Ant was the only one that like really had it going on offense. And early in the game, that was the biggest problem. There were some defensive issues, certainly some lapses defensively, but it was weird. Like a lot of times when the Wolves are not completely in it, if they're, a little bit off, if they're not playing super hard, it's both ends of the floor. I didn't feel like that on offense. Wasn't too ISO-y. It wasn't too ball is sticky-y. It wasn't too turnover-y. It just like shots weren't going in. But defensively, there were some lapses. There was some blown coverages. There were free runners to the rim. There was some open floor stuff. There was pushing the pace after makes, which you better believe teams are going to do to the Wolves moving forward. That's something the Lakers are certainly going to do, because the Wolves still struggle to get back defensively after both makes and misses, really, but especially after makes. The Wolves make a shot and like nobody gets all the way back, and opposing centers could just rim run and get a dunk or layup or get fouled or both. That was a problem really in this game. So the Wolves were only up one at halftime, but then like we saw the last couple times out, Thursday in Memphis, and then also to an extent Friday as well, the third quarter was a bit of an offensive explosion for Minnesota, and specifically for Anthony Edwards. He was awesome. Minnesota had 40 points in the third quarter of this game, outscored Utah by 12. So Minnesota was up 13 going to the fourth quarter. And it was effectively over. They ended up winning the game by 11. The line, by the way, was like 23.5 on FanDuel coming in. And there was some stat I saw that the Wolves, it's like the only team since like the 93 Bulls to have two spreads that are like greater than 20.5 in consecutive games, which is nuts. And of course, they didn't cover. I can't remember on Friday if they covered or not. They certainly didn't cover in this game. But the offense, I thought all game was clicking. It just missed shots. They finished the game shooting. They were 47% from the field. They were only 30% from outside the arc. Minnesota only got to the line 16 times in this game, which is pretty low for them, especially of late. And they missed a bunch of free throws too. They were 11 of 16 at the line. So shot themselves in the foot in some different ways, like creative ways, I guess, compared to what they normally do. Typically, it's mostly turnovers. They had 13, like not ideal, but not a horrific number. And, like Jaden McDaniels traveled for no reason on the last possession of the game when the game was basically over, like an unnecessary travel, right? Unnecessary turnover. But it was really just missing threes. And they shot 43 threes as a team. Ant shot 18 in search of the 3-point shooting crown, the 3-point makes crown this year, which he achieved. Malik Beasley had made 4 earlier in the day in a game. Ant needed to make 6 to tie, 7 to win the crown, and he did it. And it was mostly in the flow of the game. There were a couple that were a little shot hunty, but for the most part, at least up until he got to like 12, 13 attempts, it was pretty much in the flow. Like there were none that were no, don't shoot that, Ant moments. Like he I thought picked his spots pretty well. And he also sometimes when he's doing that, that's just all he's doing. He also was getting into the paint in this game. It was 6 of 7 at the free throw line. He shot 18 threes, but he also shot 13 twos. And that's a completely viable shot mix. 8 of 13 from 2-point range, had a couple of nice kind of floaters in the paint. Mid-range there wasn't a ton of that in this game, which was nice. It was just a well-rounded, well-played game from Anthony Edwards. I thought he was good defensively. I thought he made good passes. It actually was one of the better all-around Ant games we've seen here in the last few weeks, I think. And a good sign headed into the playoffs with a few days off now, at least 5 days completely off, or 5 days with no games, I should say. And really nice to see that at this time of year. I want to talk about a couple of other things the Wolves did very well in this game. We'll talk a little bit more about Ant. I'll do a quick studs and duds. And then I want to take a half step back and look at like, hey, should we be feeling better or worse about that? Like, and I'm not going to tell anybody how they should feel, really. I'm going to say, like, from my perspective, let's compare this year to how we felt exactly 12 months ago, what the vibes were around the team. I want to talk about that a bit and kind of peek at the West and how things shook out and what could have been, what might have been, and a brief look at my midseason, my All-Star break predictions and how I did. I actually did pretty good. We'll look at that and we'll set up the rest of the week. It's all upcoming here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. Basketball and hockey playoffs are heating up. Coming up this week, there's no better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than with Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections and you're in. You can even combine players across sports. Basketball, hockey, baseball, of course, is ongoing, and more for your chance to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Here's what I would probably look at this week. We got some play-in games. So maybe you want to look at one of the play-in games here upcoming. We ended up with the Warriors in a play-in game. Maybe you want to take Steph Curry for more than 28 points or whatever that gets set at. or I don't know, Kawhi Leonard for more than 8 rebounds in a particular game. Maybe those numbers look nice to you. You could go ahead and do that. You could wait until the weekend or play that and then also play on the weekend when the Wolves are back in action. You can download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKDOWNNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKDOWNNBA at the Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends at Wayfair. Spring is here, and that means it's home project season. Whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full renovation, Wayfair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. From small updates like stylish cabinet hardware to major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, or outdoor lighting, Wayfair has quality products for every budget. It's patio season right now, so we're looking at some patio upgrades. We made a couple of deck chairs, maybe chair and a table for our front porch. We're definitely looking at Wayfair. We got a rug earlier this year, a lamp for the living room. Apparently a lot of furniture here recently. Wayfair's the best place to look. Their selection is super, super incredible. They're free and fast shipping, make it so easy. No hauling heavy items from the store, which is a massive thing. Also, I love that they have top brands as well. So depending on what you're looking for, they have GE, they have Moen, etc. at great prices. The shopping at Wayfair is seamless. You'll find exactly what you need to fit your space and style. Wayfair makes home improvement easy. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's Wayfair, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Okay. So we talked about the flow of this game and how the Wolves offensively, the process was there. The shots weren't being made. It's not the only time that's happened in the last couple of weeks. There were some things they did really well throughout the game that ultimately helped them come away with the win. Number one in that category would be offensive rebounding. And then secondary to that and related would be points in the paint. The Timberwolves grabbed 17 offensive rebounds in this game, which was 8 more than the Jazz. Or plus 8 on the offensive glass. They were plus 6 on the defensive glass, which meant they were plus 14 overall on the boards in this game. It was huge. And I mean, Rudy Gobert had 18 boards himself. They got 10 out of Julius Randle and 8 out of Reid. It's not very often that those three bigs are going to combine for, what is that? I can't do math, apparently. 18 plus 18 is 36. Yes. 36 rebounds. Those three guys going to combine for 36 rebounds. That doesn't happen maybe as often as it should. Rudy had 8 offensive rebounds. Now, he also shot 50% from the field, which is a bad number for him, just 8 of 16. He missed a ton of bunnies in this game. I mean, he missed one dunk. There were at least 2 plays that he should have dunked the ball, and he tried to lay it in. He missed one layup that should have been a dunk that he just shot it over the rim. Like, it hit the backboard and glanced off to the other side. Like, it was not a good shooting night for Rudy. He got his own rebound. He played patty cake, Kevin Love, Moses Malone style. Like, I don't know, probably 4 of his 8 offensive rebounds were of that variety, but it still matters. Like, yeah, if you make the shot in the first place, you don't have to do that. But like, the effort to continue to keep at it, to get those rebounds, to generate extra possessions for your team, still a positive thing regardless. And again, the point is, as a team, Minnesota was plus 8 on the offensive glass. And then that also kind of played into their massive lead in points in the paint. They were plus 18 on points in the paint in this game, 62-44. And again, nobody was playing for Utah, and they certainly didn't have a whole lot of size on the team that they fielded. And so we saw the Wolves kind of have a field day in the paint, and that included Ant driving. Nickeil Alexander-Walker got in on the act, had I think 2. I guess he only made 1 2-pointer in this game. He had one really nice drive, which we don't see him shoot a ton of 2s. His only 2-point attempt of the game, a nice drive to the basket. We talked about Rudy. Ant, Julius Randle, of course, the size advantage in this game. Naz didn't make any 3s in this game. He was aggressive putting the ball on the floor. He was 5 of 7 on 2-point attempts. Naz Reid was in this game. So Minnesota was appropriately aggressive getting into the paint. They didn't draw a ton of fouls. They only attempted 16 free throws, but they did a good job of scoring in the paint in this one. Another thing they did well, they pushed the pace. They actually themselves got out and ran in the fast break. And I know I talked a little bit about how Utah would push the pace, was very advantageous. Nope, was opportunistic. That's the word I'm looking for. Was opportunistic with when they pushed the pace. Utah only had 5 fast break points, but there were some secondary break opportunities, and probably all 5 of those came after Wolves makes, where they just said, you know what, they're not getting back, let's run. And so that's something that, like, are we going to see, like, say, the Lakers do that in the playoffs? So the Lakers going to try and take advantage of Minnesota's, we'll call it lackadaisicalness. Well, the Lakers don't play at a super fast pace, but we've seen plenty of teams that don't generally play at a fast pace take advantage of those moments for the Wolves, or against the Wolves, I should say, when the Wolves just don't get back. Like pick your spots, and you can get some free buckets every night, or every time you play the Wolves. And Utah did that. But Minnesota overall won fast break points 15-5. I thought they pushed the pace really well in this game. They generated some turnovers. It wasn't a massive, they actually only forced 14 turnovers, while turning it over 13 times themselves, but they were more opportunistic in scoring more off of Utah turnovers than Utah was able to do off of Minnesota turnovers. We saw them push the pace in transition at the right times, the Wolves did. And that's something else that you're going to want to do against a team like the Lakers in the playoffs. I mean, LA turns the ball over a fair amount. Like, we know Luka's prone to turnovers at times. LeBron, same thing. I mean, obviously fantastic players, but there's going to be opportunities for the Wolves to turn defense into offense. And that's something they've done overall a better job of this season than we've seen them do at other times in the Chris Finch era. So looking for things from this game that the Wolves could then, translate or pull forward into the playoffs. That's one of them. Is turning defense into offense, being opportunistic with opportunities to run, to get trail threes in transition, to push it into the corners in transition. They've got enough fantastic three-point shooters and guys who can get to the rim and get to the foul line that it makes too much sense to run in transition when you generate opponent turnovers. Okay, studs and duds quickly before we look ahead here. Obviously, Anthony Edwards, phenomenal game for Ant. Very strong all-around game. 43 points on 31 shots. 7 of 18 on threes, 6 of 7 at the line, 6 boards, 5 assists, 3 steals, a block, only 2 turnovers in this game. So 4 stocks, 5 assists, 6 boards. That's a well-rounded performance. Ant played 40 minutes. Rudy played 38, by the way. Nobody else played more than 33. My second stud, it's going to be Rudy Gobert. The shooting around the rim, it was pretty frustrating that he missed as many bunnies as he did, but it's hard to argue with 19 and 18 and 4 blocks and a steal, 5 stocks overall. Rudy had a quieter game or two at the end of last week, but for the most part, for the last month, it's probably been the best, call it 3-week stretch of Rudy's career in a Wolves uniform. We talked about it last week on the show before he had a quieter end to the week, but Sunday was a very loud end to the regular season for Rudy Gobert. He had some great comments post-game too, by the way, about how he knows how important his role is going to be, finishing around the rim, making himself available, offensive rebounding when teams are going to put 2 on the ball against Anthony Edwards, which they undoubtedly will do. My last stud is going to be, you could go Dante, you could go Naz. I thought they both played really well. I'm going to go Naz Reid. I know Dante hit 4 threes. That's great. He had 16 points. That's great. Naz had 11 and 8. He had 3 offensive rebounds, a couple of assists. I mentioned this earlier. It was 5 of 8 on 2-pointers. The 3-ball has not been falling for Naz as much lately. He was aggressive going to the basket. He had an and one in this game. And the offensive rebounding was nice as well to see him get on the offensive glass. I thought it was a really good performance. Dante was great. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was very good. No duds. I mean, you could go Mike Conley. He played only 15 minutes. He was 0 of 3 in this game. I don't think he played enough to really be a dud, and he wasn't actively bad. They just, I think we may see this in the playoffs too, where Mike starts, and if he doesn't get off to a hot start, depending on how the flow of the game is, I mean, he's not going to play more than 25 minutes anyway, but it may be a little bit, I don't want to say a token start, because you don't really do that in the playoffs, but the size of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and also just the fact that, I mean, he's been pretty good offensively too. Let's see, I guess Conley did play over this win streak. He did have a few games where he was over 30 minutes. Over the last 6 games of the regular season, though, he's only played over 25 minutes 2 times, and he played 15 against Utah, 14 on Friday against Brooklyn. Granted, games the Wolves kind of won going away, but it'll be interesting to monitor what the Wolves do with his minutes as we get into the playoffs. All right. Let's do a bit of a pulse check, a vibe check comparison between this year and last year. We'll kind of break down what's happened here over the last, few days where the Wolves have landed, and peeking ahead to the playoffs. We're not going to get into the Lakers matchup too much today, other than some high-level stuff. Again, we'll do plenty of Lakers talk over the next 4 days as we get you ready for the weekend. So we'll do all that here next, and then we'll close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here. Play-in tournament starts on Tuesday. Games Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. And the Timberwolves will start over the weekend. The actual playoffs start on Saturday. FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. FanDuel makes betting extremely easy. Maybe you just want to pick the Wolves. Just hammer the Wolves for the first round against the Lakers. They're going to be underdogs, of course. You could dive into player props. You could look at maybe Ant three-pointers. Maybe Ant's going to go crazy assist-wise because he's going to be doubled, 2 on the ball all the time in the Lakers series. You could look at all that and go over-unders there with the prop bets. There's tons of tons of player props, tons of prop bets for your favorite players. No matter how you want to say that, it's all there at FanDuel. Plus, after the games tip off, you can combine your live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Okay. So the Timberwolves closed the season. I mentioned this at the outset here. They won 17 of their last 21 games. Rewind a little bit. Go back to the All-Star break. My prediction at the All-Star break, and I'll probably throw this into a segment later in the week too, is kind of like fully put a bow on the regular season once all the stats are in. Everything's updated online with the stats for the year. But at the All-Star break, I predicted the Timberwolves would finish 21-6 and win 51 games and finish with the 4th seed. They went 19-8. So I was 2 games off. They finished it with 49 wins instead of 51, and they got the 6th seed instead of the 4. Now imagine, had they beaten the Bucks in the game that they were up 24 in the 4th quarter last Tuesday, they would have won 50 games, and they would have been the 3 or the 4 seed. I think they actually would have been the 3 seed if they had beaten the Bucks, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they would have been the 3 seed if they'd beaten the Bucks, because the Wolves would have had a 4-way tie with the Lakers, Nuggets, and Clippers, and the Wolves would have won the 4-way tie because combined they were 9-2 against those teams. 3-0 against the Clippers, 4-0 against the Nuggets, and 2-2 against Lakers. They were 9-2 against those 3 teams. So the 3 teams the Wolves have the tiebreaker against, or I guess in the case of the Lakers that they're tied with, are directly in front of them. The 2 teams they would have lost it against, the Warriors and Grizzlies, are behind them and stuck in playing each other in the play-in in the 7-8 game. So think about that. If they'd beaten the Bucks last Tuesday, Minnesota would have won 50 games and finished 3rd in the West. My bold prediction at the All-Star break was they'd win 51 games and finish 4th in the West. Just missed it. Either way, they lost 4 out of 5 coming out of the All-Star break. Remember that? They lost 4 out of 5 coming out of the All-Star break. That was the loss at Houston, lost by 6. They lost at home to OKC. Then they beat OKC with that crazy 4th quarter comeback, lost at the Lakers, and then lost at Utah in the game that Ant was suspended for. And remember the Lakers game, everybody, we'll talk about that in a second. There were a bunch of guys still out. So that could have been a 5-game losing streak if they don't have that crazy overtime comeback win at OKC. They lose 4 out of 5 out of the break. Then right after that, they rip off 8 wins in a row. Then they lose 3 out of 4. And then they close the season by winning 8 out of 9 games. So overall, post All-Star break, Minnesota goes 19-8, and they win 17 of their final 21 games. That's a really strong finish to the season. Now, remember 1 year ago, the Wolves kind of backed in. And this year, by the way, they're 1 game out of the 3 spot in the West. I know they finished 6th. They're 1 game out of the 3 spot. They would have flipped with the Lakers. Actually, I don't know what that roundabout tiebreaker would have been with 4 teams. I'm not sure who actually would have been 6, but the Wolves would have been 3. Remember a year ago, Minnesota lost 2 out of 3 to finish the season, including losing at Denver. They squeaked past Atlanta at home, and then they lost by 19 at home to Phoenix in an important game 82. They went into the playoffs. They were in the 1 seed for most of the season, first in the West. Remember, Wolves coaching staff finished at the All-Star break, first for most of the season. They lost to Phoenix by 19 in the season finale, regular season finale. They lost to Phoenix. They were swept by Phoenix throughout the season, over the course of the regular season in 4 contests. And everyone thought they would lose in the first round of the playoffs to Phoenix. They'd be upset by the 6th seed. I even picked them to lose in 6 games was my prediction. I did the crossover with Brendan Clean at Locked On Suns this time last year, and he thought the Suns would win in 5 games. I at least gave the Wolves 6 to lose to the Suns. What happened? Well, the Wolves swept the Suns. Then they beat the Nuggets, who they had just lost to third to last game of the regular season as they, quote unquote, backed in as a 56-win 3 seed. The vibes were not great going into the playoffs last year. I don't know that they feel much better now. Like the overall, and I'm like, just, I don't know, like this is Twitter vibes, right? Like I'm just kind of I'm putting words in people's mouths. I get that. But it does feel like the general sentiment around this team is they weren't as good this year as we thought they'd be. We thought they'd go from a 56-win team. Like the expectation was they would continue to build on that because Ant's a superstar. Well, the roster arguably got worse, right? You traded away your second best player on the eve of training camp. Of course, things were going to be challenging to start. And now they close the season winning 17-21. Ant makes the most threes of anybody in the league. He ascends another half step towards superstardom, I would say. The vibes should be better going into the playoffs. Yeah, the Wolves are the 6th seed, but if they had won one more game, if they had held on to that Bucks game a week ago, which I realize we could play the ifs and buts game all day long, but like that's not a crazy one, right? You hold on to a 24-point lead, they would be the 3 seed. The Wolves actually have the second best point differential in the entire Western Conference, next to only OKC. They have the 4th best point differential in the entire NBA, behind the big 3 of OKC, Cleveland, and Boston. The Wolves easily could be the 3 seed. Their Pythagorean win-loss record, I think they should have 54 wins based on the Pythagorean win-loss, which is pretty much based on that point differential. They've lost so many close games. Which, is that a problem in the playoffs? Yeah, but it could be. But there's a lot of other factors that go into it in the regular season. There should be some optimism. Now, of course, they have to face Luka Doncic. And we're going to talk about this later in the week. We're going to do a crossover episode with the Kamenetsky brothers at Locked On Lakers. We've had them on before. I've been on their show. We'll do a crossover where we'll talk about both teams. We're going to talk about how other teams have tried to slow Luka down. We'll, I'm sure, talk about how the Wolves could not slow Luka down last year in the conference finals in a 5-game loss. Wolves lose to the Mavs in 5 games in the conference finals. The Wolves went 2-2 against the Lakers this year, but all 4 games look very different from one another. We'll talk a bit more about that as we get later into the week. But the last time the Wolves saw the Lakers, Luka was on the Lakers, and LeBron played. Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves all played for the Lakers, but the Wolves did not have Rudy Gobert, and they did not have Julius Randle. They started Jalen Clark, who was in foul trouble. Naz Reid started. Terrence Shannon was the Wolves' leading scorer, had 25 points off the bench for Minnesota in that game. Nickeil Alexander-Walker played 35 minutes. Rob Dillingham and Luka Garza played rotation minutes. That was a very different-looking game, and the Wolves still only lost that one by 9. But that was the only game they played against the Lakers with Luka. So we'll also talk a little bit about how the Wolves defended Luka in that game. We can talk about what they did last year. We'll also likely have Jack Borman on the show. Of course, he does the postcast. I did the postcast with him 3 different games last week, and he does all the postcasts over at Locked On Sports Minnesota, former editor-in-chief at Kato Supis. We'll have him on the show this week. We've got 4 more shows, and pretty much we'll be breaking down Wolves-Lakers for the majority of it. So stay tuned for all that, but it'll be a very intriguing matchup. If it obviously, if it wasn't for the Luka trade, Lakers probably aren't 3rd anyway, but that's the, like, pre-Luka trade, I felt okay about the Wolves matchup against the Lakers. Now it's dicier. I mean, Jack and I ranked this on the postcast after Friday night's win, and of the 4 most likely matchups for Minnesota in the playoffs, we all put the Lakers last, or I shouldn't say we all. Me and Jack both put the Lakers last after the Thunder, by the way. I think the Wolves actually match up better against the Thunder than the Lakers. So, yeah, it's not going to be a walk in the park. The Wolves are the underdogs, both seed-wise, and I'm sure they will be in terms of series odds. We'll talk about what FanDuel has for that as well. So, a lot to get into this week, a lot of fun shows ahead, but don't lose sight of the Wolves winning 17-21 to close the season, winning 8 of their last 9 to close the season, with the only loss being the collapse in Milwaukee. And the Wolves headed into the playoffs with, I would say, some momentum. And now they get a few days off as well, which obviously helped last year going into that sweep against Phoenix. So a lot to get to throughout the week. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder about the newsletter. The Wolves, of course, are ready for playoff basketball. Locked On Wolves has you covered every step of the way. Subscribe to the Locked On Wolves podcast newsletter for expert analysis, insider insights, and all the playoff action delivered straight to your inbox for free. Plus, now, as a subscriber, you'll be entered to win one of these three amazing prizes: a $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your Sports Cave setup, a $300 Game Time gift card, friends at Game Time, and a $200 Fanatics gift card. It's easy and free to enter. Simply subscribe between now and April 30th, the end of this month, 2025, to be automatically entered to win. Don't miss a moment of the Wolves' hopeful championship run. Join the Locked On Wolves newsletter today and experience the playoffs like never before. Subscribe today and enter to win by clicking the link in the description. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.